After my raise was denied, I exposed a hidden clause. In a $65M deal, secured $430K. And took control. Ousting the CEO, CFO, and GC. The email arrived at 3:25 p.m. on a Friday. The corporate coward's preferred time slot. It enables the sender to rush out to their Tesla and hit the 295 freeway before the recipient has time to process their rage. Subject: Ray. Compensation review and Q2 adjustment. I didn't open it immediately. I left it there, bold and unread, pulsing like a migraine in the center of my Outlook screen. I sipped my lukewarm green tea. I looked around the open plan office of Pinnacle Innovations, a mid-sized disruptor in Silicon Valley that smelled constantly of roasted coffee beans in desperation. To my left, the sales team was playing frantic ping-pong, high-fiving over a deal that I knew had been structured incorrectly. To my right, marketing interns were recording a TikTok dance about hustle culture. I am Emily. I'm 38 years old. I am the senior contract and intellectual property analyst. That means I'm the one who reads the 400-page documents that the salespeople sign without looking. I'm in charge of ensuring that the rights to our source code are not accidentally sold to a Cayman-based shell company. I am the invisible guardrail on a highway crowded with drunk drivers. I clicked the email. Hello, Emily. I appreciate your patience regarding the compensation adjustment request. We reviewed your performance metrics, which remain excellent. However, due to the current reallocation of Q2 liquidity into strategic acquisition channels, your raise was lost in legal. We simply do not have the approval code to move it through this cycle. Let's return next quarter. The best Jake HR business partner. I am lost in legal. I stared at the phrase. It was cute. It was ironic. It was a lie so lazy that it was almost offensive. I am legal. Or at least I am the foundation of it. The general counsel, Mark, who spends 80% of his time golfing, and the other 20% asking me how to convert PDFs to Word, has no idea what a budget approval code is. It was the third year in a row. 3 years ago, there was pandemic uncertainty. 2 years ago, there was market volatility. It has now been lost in law. Meanwhile, I knew Jake and HR had just approved a $12,000 retention bonus for a junior developer who had broken the build server twice the previous month. I knew this because I had completed the NDA paperwork for the bonuses. Quick side note, if you're listening to this and have ever been told your raise is on the way while watching the CEO buy a new boat, do me a favor and subscribe, and possibly upvote this story. Fuels our soul, and allows us to afford the fine wine we'll need to get through this retelling. Thanks. I did not scream. I did not type a furious response in all caps. I did not walk into the break room and steal the excellent creamer. I'm a professional. I just removed my glasses, cleaned them with a microfiber cloth, and experienced a distinct, chilly switch flip in the back of my mind. It was not sadness. It wasn't even rage, really. It was evident. They assumed I was furniture. A robust, dependable, ergonomic chair that you could sit in and forget about. They assumed this because I was silent, didn't play ping pong, didn't wear Pavonia vests, and didn't say, "Let's go." When I closed a ticket, I had no leverage. They were wrong. I took another look at the sales staff. They were celebrating the Vanguard account. It was the crown jewel, a $65 million joint venture with a major defense logistics company. It was the arrangement that would turn Pinnacle Innovations into a unicorn. It was the deal that funded the CEO's new glass-walled office. It was also a transaction that I had drafted, not the glossy pitch deck or the handshake. I created the contract, the Master Service Agreement, MSA, the Intellectual Property Indemnity Schedule, and the 60-page addendum on royalty structures. That amendment stood out in my mind. I wrote it 3 years ago late at night, when the company was desperate and cash-strapped. We needed Vanguard to sign, but we couldn't give them the upfront equity they requested. So I created a performance-based royalty trigger. It was complex. It was buried in legal jargon that would make your eyes bleed if you didn't know what you were searching for. I stood up. My knees popped slightly, reminding me that I was no longer 25. I strolled by the ping-pong table. "Hello, Emily." "Smile," one of the account execs roared, taking a shot at the wall. "It is Friday." I offered him a weak, forced smile. "Have a wonderful weekend, Ethan." I walked into the safe file room. Most things were now digital, but the original Vanguard contract with wet signatures remained in the fireproof safe. "I have the code." Of course, I had the code. I was the only one who ever entered there. The room smelt of ozone and dust. I turned the dial on the heavy steel cabinet. Click, click, and clack. I pulled out the folder. It was 3 inches thick and navy blue. Copy of the completed Vanguard licensing agreement with the label. I opened it to page 42, clause 14C. I ran my finger across the text. The font was Times New Roman, size 10, modest, unassuming, and deadly. If the licensor Pinnacle Innovations achieves 3 consecutive quarters of 99.995% uptime while processing more than 5 terabytes of client data, the milestones licensor acknowledges that intellectual property rights for the core algorithm will shift to a shared royalty model. Entitle the original IP architect to a retroactive commission of 0.5% of gross contract value, unless the architect signs a waiver. I verified the signature page signed by Vanguard's CEO. Our CEO signed. And Emily Parker, our IP architect, drafting analyst, signed at the bottom. I closed the binder. The silence in the filing room was heavy, but not empty. It was filled with potential energy. Lost in legal, I said to the empty room. The irony was delightful. My raise was not gone. It was right here, hidden in plain sight, accruing interest for 3 years. I was not going to respond to Jake. I was not going to beg. I was going to teach them about the value of reading the fine print. I tucked the binder into my tote bag. Technically, taking original documents is a breach of company policy, but so is wage theft, and I had a sense that by Monday morning, business policy would no longer matter. I spent the weekend in my home office, which is completely opposite of Pinnacle Innovations headquarters. It is quiet. It is arranged. There is no ping-pong table. Only an extremely efficient espresso machine, and a cat named Sarari, who evaluates me from a sunbeam. I had a contract. Now I need the data. Clause 14C was a dormant trigger. It depended on performance metrics. If the company sucked, the clause was meaningless. If the company performed particularly well, the clause awoke and wanted food. I accessed the admin dashboard. My access level is God mode, not because I'm a hacker, but because 5 years ago, the CTO grew weary of manually accepting my audit log requests, and simply granted me root access to the data warehouse. He probably forgot he had done it. People forget a lot of information about me. I retrieved the uptime reports for the previous 24 months. Q1, 2023. 99.995% uptime. Q2, 2023. 99.998% uptime. Q3 2023. 99.999% uptime. There it was. The first milestone. 3 consecutive quarters of near perfection. I recall those months. The engineering staff had slept beneath their desks. I'd personally ordered 70 pizzas for late-night coding sessions. The CEO had purchased a Porsche to commemorate the team's tenacity. I'd received a $35 Starbucks gift card. Next, consider the data volume. Client data was handled at 10 terabytes, 12 terabytes, and 18 terabytes, much exceeding the 5 terabytes criterion. I sat back, the blue light from the monitor reflecting in my glasses. The math was straightforward, but the implications were startling. 0.5% of the gross contract value. The Vanguard transaction was valued at $65 million over 5 years. This is $350,000, plus retroactive fines for failure to inform. Plus interest. We were looking at a minimum of $500,000. But it was more than simply the money. It was also the structure. I wrote Clause 14C as a poison pill to safeguard the company from a hostile takeover when we were still a startup. It was intended to make stealing intellectual property expensive. But, in their arrogance, the present executive team, the majority of whom were hired after I prepared the contract, had never bothered to study the heritage agreements. They handled the Vanguard contract like a cash cow, milking it dry, despite the fact that the pasture's fence was electrified. I printed each log. I printed the quarterly papers in which the CEO boasted about these precise stats to the board. I printed the CTO's email, certifying the successful execution of Vanguard standards. I was making a paper fortification. Sunday night, I sat on my balcony with a drink of Cabernet Sauvignon. I watched the California sunset flow purple and orange across the hills. I was thinking about Jake and human resources. I thought about his lost legal email. He had attempted to save the company around $8,000 per year by denying my raise. In doing so, He compelled me to evaluate my own worth. I pulled out my phone. I did not contact a lawyer. Not yet. I called the only person who would understand the irony of the situation. I summoned the enemy. Well, enemy is a strong word. In the realm of high-stakes contracts, opposing counsel is not your adversary. They are your sparring partners. If you are good, there is reciprocal respect. I dialed the number for Nathaniel Turner. He was the general lawyer for Vanguard, a shark in a tailored suit who negotiated deals for defense companies. He terrified our CEO. He answered the second ring. Emily. His voice was gravelly and pricey Scotch. Sunday. Either the servers are down or you are quitting. Neither, Nathaniel, I said, stirring my drink. I'm doing some housework. I was examining the MSA we signed 3 years ago. Specifically, the royalty amendment. The line paused, followed by a long, heavy quiet. I could hear him shift in his leather chair. Clause 14C? He asked. He knew. Of course, he knew. He was a good attorney. He has probably flagged it years before. I laughed at how risky it was for us and signed it because it did not harm Vanguard. In fact, failing to pay the IP architect, me, would theoretically place Pinnacle Innovations in violation of vendor compliance guidelines. Clause 14C, I confirmed. It appears that my organization has ignored the notice requirements. Nathaniel inquired. The milestones were met 18 months ago, and they still haven't paid you. His voice lowered an octave. It wasn't pity, it was predatory interest, not a dime. In fact, I just denied my cost of living adjustment. Nathaniel had a giggle. It was a dry and harsh sound. Emily. It is incredibly careless of them to breach the payment obligations to the IP architect, as this threatens the indemnification shield for the entire software suite. Technically, Pinnacle Innovations is now using our systems without a valid license. Technically, I agree. I figured you might want to know before I file anything. I appreciate the heads up, Nathaniel said. Tomorrow's lunch, at the third-floor restaurant with awful lighting. See you at noon, Nathaniel. I hung up. My hand was not shaking. I had a level of tranquility that I had not felt in years. I was no longer merely an employee. I was a burden. And by Monday, I would be the most expensive problem they'd ever overlooked. The restaurant was named Elmber. It was dark, pricey, and offered steaks as big as hubcaps. It was the type of location where agreements were made in whispers, and the waiters knew never to break the silence. Nathaniel was already there, with an untouched martini in front of him. He resembled a silver-haired wolf in a brawny outfit. He didn't get up when I came. He simply nodded to the empty chair. Emily, you appear to be familiar with the burial sites. I dug the graves, Nathaniel. Of course I know where they are. I sat down and laid my napkin in my lap. Please serve sparkling water, I told the waiter, who appeared out of the darkness. Nathaniel cut to the chase before the water arrived. I had my team evaluate the deal this morning. You're correct. Clause 14C is inviolable. It is actually brilliant. Who allowed you to put that in there? The former CEO. He was desperate to complete the transaction. He told me to include whatever measures were necessary to protect the IP value. He believed it shielded the corporation from you. I didn't understand it shielded the IP author from the firm. Nathaniel smirked. And the current regime, Mark, a golf pro disguised as a general counsel. Mark believes force majeure is a French dessert. Nathaniel chuckled, but his eyes remained cold. He tapped his manicured finger on the table. Here's the situation from my perspective. Emily, Vanguard pays Pinnacle Innovations $20 million annually. We rely on your software. If Pinnacle Innovations violates its own internal IP compensation protocols, it creates a liability chain. If you sue them and win an injunction, you could potentially freeze the code. I could, I explained softly, but I don't want to harm the product. I built the product structure. I only want what the contract says is mine. And you want them to bleed a little, Nathaniel explained. I took a sip of sparkling water. I want them to understand that loss and legality are not viable accounting strategies. Nathaniel removed a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the white tablecloth. It was thin and precise. This is not legal advice, he explained. The standard legal disclaimer. But Vanguard takes compliance extremely seriously. If we discovered that a key vendor was failing to compensate its primary intellectual property architect, we would have to issue a formal notice of inquiry. I would demand an audit of all IP-related disbursements to ensure that the software we use is free of encumbrances. I opened the folder. It was a draft letter addressed to the CEO of Pinnacle Innovations, regarding an urgent audit of intellectual property compliance and royalties. It demanded proof that Clause 14C had been met. It quoted the exact milestones I had printed out. It requested a response within 48 hours. If you send this, I replied. Looking up. Mark will panic. The CEO will scream. Good, Nathaniel said. They have been overcharging us for support hours for 6 months. I have been looking for a reason to squeeze them. You just handed me the vice grip. He leaned in. You understand, Emily, that once I send this, there is no going back. They will search for the leak. They'll know it's you. They will not know I corrected him. They'll suspect. But they can't prove I spoke with you. Even if they do, California prohibits retaliation against an employee for asserting contractual rights to their own compensation. Nathaniel whispered trouble damages, savoring the legal term like fine wine. Exactly, do it, I said. Nathaniel signaled for the check. I'll send it tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m. I recommend that you be in the office. The fireworks should be spectacular. We did not shake hands. We did not need to. We were two professionals who understood how the machine worked. I walked out of the restaurant into the bright California sun. I felt lighter. I returned to the office for the afternoon. I sat at my desk. I answered emails. I assisted a junior associate with correcting a formatting error in the NDA. I was helpful. It was pleasurable. I saw Jake from HR walk past my desk. He was holding a green smoothie while wearing noise-canceling headphones. He did not even look at me. Jake, I thought you'd enjoy the smoothie. It might be the last thing you can digest comfortably for a while. Tuesday morning at 9:02 a.m. The office was filled with the usual caffeine-induced chaos. The marketing team was arguing over font sizes. The sales team rang a literal cowbell, because a $500 subscription had been sold. Then the email arrived. I did not receive it directly. It was sent to James, the CEO, David, the CFO, and Mark, the general counsel. I sat quietly, monitoring the network traffic headers. I saw Vanguard Legal's email enter the server. It was marked with high importance. At 9:15 a.m., I noticed James forward it to Mark. Subject: FWD Urgent Audit. Mark, handle this. It's probably just standard compliance spam. Do not let them slow down the Q2 pipeline. At 9:30 a.m., I noticed Mark forward it to the VP of Finance. Subject: FWD Urgent Audit. David. They are inquiring about royalty structures. Have we got any of those? Simply send them some generic financials. At 9:45 a.m., I received an email from Mark, General Counsel to Emily Parker, with the subject line, Vanguard whining again. Emily. Vanguard sent some formal nonsense regarding an IP audit and Clause 14C. It sounds like legacy contract gibberish. Can you write a standard? We are fully compliant. Don't devote too much time to it. I need you to focus on the merger due diligence. THXG. I stared at the screen. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing too loudly. They had not even read it. They had not opened the attachment in which Nathaniel had explicitly stated the milestones. They saw Clause 14C, had no idea what it was, and forwarded it to the only person in the company who knew what it was. They were requesting that the arsonist investigate the smell of smoke. I opened the email. I replied. Hello, Mark. I will record this in the compliance tracker. I need to retrieve the original files to confirm the precise language of Clause 14C. It may take a few days to cross-reference the performance logs. I'll keep you posted. Best wishes, Emily. Take your time, Mark said immediately. Take my time. I wasn't about to take my time. I was planning to let the clock run out. The Vanguard letter demanded a reply within 48 hours. That meant Thursday morning. If we missed the deadline, Vanguard reserved the right to suspend payments pending an investigation. I added a new digital folder to my encrypted drive. I called it Contingency Escalation. I dragged one into this folder. The original email from HR denying my raise. 2. An email from Mark, asking me to handle the audit of my own unpaid royalties. 3. A PDF export of a Slack conversation in which David, the CFO, joked about hiding profits to avoid paying bonuses last year. I save everything. Never irritate the person who oversees the data retention policy. Wednesday was a blur of surreal normalcy. I sat in meetings where James discussed radical transparency and valuing our employees. I watched him present a slide deck, highlighting our record-breaking uptime. We're unstoppable. James pumped his fists. Vanguard is delighted with our performance. They are ecstatic with the performance. I believe they were less pleased that you were stealing from the creator of that performance. I looked at Mark throughout the meeting. He was scrolling through Instagram on his phone beneath the table. He'd totally forgotten about the Vanguard email. To him, it was just another task he had assigned to the assistant. I felt an unusual sensation in my chest. For years, I resented being invisible. I despised being the woman in the gray cardigan who fixed the formatting, while the men took the credit. However, invisibility was now considered a superpower. I was a ghost inside the machine. I was walking through walls, planting dynamite, and they were handing me matches. Thursday has arrived. The 48-hour deadline was approaching. I didn't send my response. I did not write the compliance letter. Instead, I updated the ticket in our internal system. Status is pending legal review. Awaiting executive approval. Technically, I was waiting. I was waiting for them to finish their jobs. I waited for them to realize the cliff edge was right there. They did not. At 5 p.m. on Thursday, the deadline passed. At 5:01 p.m., my phone vibrated. A text message from Nathaniel. The radio is silent. Old move. I replied. They think it is spam. They delegated it to me. I am reviewing. Nathaniel responded with a single emoji. Popcorn. The trap was set. We just had to wait for the snap. Friday morning, the audit committee meets. This was usually a borefest in which David, the CFO, attempted to explain why we were burning cash faster than a bonfire in a wind tunnel. Today, however, the vibe was different. There was a strange energy. We gathered in the disrupted conference room, with glass walls, uncomfortable avant-garde chairs, and a $15,000 espresso machine humming in the corner. David stood at the head of the table. He was 35, wore a vest that cost more than my car, and exuded the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his life. Okay team, David said while clapping his hands. This month's Vanguard payments seem unusual. Accounts receivable indicates that the wire is pending. Does anyone know why? My heart beat with a slow, heavy thud. Vanguard had frozen the payment. Nathaniel moved quickly. Mark spun a pen and said, "It's probably just a bank holiday wherever they bank. I'll ping them." "Do it," David said. "We need the cash flow for the Q3 offsite in Tahoe." A voice rose from the end of the table. Actually, it was Kevin. Kevin was a 22-year-old junior analyst just out of Stanford. Smart. Too smart. I was looking through the liability ledger yesterday. I noticed a flag on the contingent liabilities tab. Something about the royalty class B. It's screwing up about half of the gross. The room became quiet. David frowned. Royalty. We do not pay royalties. We are a platform, not a record label. It's part of the legacy codebase. Kevin persisted and tapped his laptop. Clause 14C. It claims to trigger at uptime milestones. Because of our high uptime, the system automatically flagged it as a liability. David looked at Mark. Mark, what the hell is Kevin talking about? Mark stared blankly. I do not know. Probably some old boilerplate that previous lawyers left in. Ignore it. I can't simply ignore a flagged liability, Mark. Kevin spoke, his voice shaking slightly. If the auditors see this. Kevin and David snap. We do not pay royalties. Delete the flag. Reclassify it as a system error. I observed Kevin. He appeared uncomfortable. He looked at his screen, then looked up and locked eyes with me. He was aware I handled contracts. I held his gaze. I did not shake my head. I did not nod. I just stared at him with a neutral, intense expression that said, "Don't be a hero, kid." Kevin turned to face David. But if the contract says, "Delete the flag, Kevin," David yelled. God. Why does everyone in this company want to find problems? We're trying to scale, reclassify it and move on. Kevin slumped. Okay, classifying as an error. He entered the command. The red flag on the screen vanished. They had just committed financial fraud by willfully concealing a known liability in front of witnesses. I quietly opened my notebook and recorded the time. 10:14 a.m. David orders the removal of the Clause 14C liability flag. Kevin complies under duress. Emily and David suddenly turned to face me. You tracked the IP information. We don't owe anyone royalties, correct? This was the moment. I could lie to protect myself for the time being but eventually implicate myself, Or I could tell the truth in a way they wouldn't hear. The contract language is extremely specific. David, I said with a steady voice. Clause 14, C exists. It was signed by the previous executive team. Whether or not to acknowledge liability is an accounting decision, not a contractual one. See? David said, returning his attention to the room. It's legacy junk, a financial decision. And I've decided on zero. Moving on. He heard what he wanted to hear. He heard you could make a decision. He did not hear that you were breaking the law. I looked down at my notebook. My hand trembled slightly now. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. After the meeting, Kevin sent me a Slack message. Kevin, hello Emily. That clause had your initials on the draft log. You wrote it, right? I paused. Kevin was a good kid. I did not want him to go down with the ship. Emily, Kevin, if I were you, I would send David an email confirming his request to delete that flag. BCC, your personal email, just for your records. Kevin. Is it really that bad? Emily. Do it now. I noticed Kevin typing bubbles for a long time. Then it came to a stop. 10 minutes later, I received a BCC on an email from Kevin to David. Subject: confirmation of instructions to reclassify royalty flag. David, as per our meeting, I've removed the liability flag as instructed. Smart kid. He's just bought himself a life raft. David and Mark had just drilled a hole in the Titanic's hull to drain the water. The weekend felt like you were holding your breath underwater. Vanguard had frozen the payment on Friday afternoon. Normally, this would set off alarms, but David, in his infinite wisdom, had left early for a networking retreat in Napa. The accounts receivable team discovered the error. Emailed David. Received his out-of-office auto-reply. And determined it was a problem for Monday. Perfect storm. I spent Saturday morning with my personal attorney, Alina, a sharp, terrifying woman who worked from a strip mall office next to a Thai massage parlor. Don't let the location mislead you. Elena consumed corporate lawyers for breakfast. I laid everything out. The binder, the emails, the documents lost due to legal rejection, the timeline of the ignored Vanguard notices, and the notes from the finance meeting where David ordered the fraud. Alina's face was expressionless as she read everything. She flipped through the pages in a steady snap, snap, snap. She finally looked up over her glasses. They are incredibly stupid, she claimed. They are arrogant, I corrected. They believe rules are for others. Well, Alina smiled, revealing very white and sharp teeth. Rules are about to become prohibitively expensive for them. Here's the strategy. Vanguard sues for breach. Pinnacle Innovations will panic. They will try to fire you for not warning them. That's when we drop the whistleblower lawsuit. Retaliation, wage theft, and Sarbanes-Oxley violations have occurred since they ordered the financial flag to be removed. I do not want to destroy the company, Elena, I said. All I want is my royalties and for them to admit they were wrong. Emily, she spoke gently. You can't get one without the other. You are a cancer. You have to cut it out. She wrote a letter of representation. 2. Pinnacle Innovations Legal Department. Re. Emily Parker's writings and claims regarding intellectual property royalties. Do not send it yet. Alina instructed. Wait for Vanguard to drop the hammer. Then, 10 minutes later, you send this to HR. It freezes them. They can't fire you if you have an active legal claim over the same issue for which they're being sued, makes you untouchable. I went home. I cleaned my apartment. I scrubbed the grout in the shower. I had to do something with my hands. Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room, staring at the dark screen of my television. I reflected on the previous 5 years. The late nights and weekends I worked for free because we were a family. I missed my niece's baptism because the server crashed, and I needed to review the emergency vendor contracts. I had given them everything. And they could not even give me a cost of living increase. Your raise got lost in legal. I whispered into the darkness. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about dignity. It was about how they looked at me but saw nothing. Tomorrow, they were going to look at me and see God. I opened my planner to Monday's date. I wrote one word. Subpoena. I laid out my outfit for the following day. A black blazer, sharp and severe. I am the funeral for your professional suit. I checked my email one final time. Nothing from David. Nothing from Mark. They slept soundly, dreaming of bonuses in Tahoe. I turned off the lights. Sleep tight, boys. I advised. Winter is coming. Monday at 8:45 a.m. An all-hands meeting. This was a monthly ritual in which James stood on stage. Yes, we had a stage in the break room where we discussed how we were changing the world. The room was packed. People are holding coffees. Looking tired. James was up there wearing a t-shirt that read, "Disrupt" under a $1,500 blazer. "This quarter is looking incredible," James exclaimed into the microphone. "Vanguard is expanding. We anticipate a 20% growth trajectory." I stood in the back, leaning against a wall near the exit. I checked my watch. 8:52 a.m. The double doors in the back of the room opened. It was not a late employee. Two men in dark suits entered. They were not dressed in tech casual. They wore federal court uniforms. Nathaniel Turner walked behind them. The room calmed down. Ripples of confusion spread from behind to in front. James paused in mid-sentence. Can I help you, gentlemen?" James inquired, squinting against the stage lights. Nathaniel walked directly to the stage. He did not look at the crowd. He looked at James. "James Foster?" Nathaniel inquired. His voice did not require a microphone. It carried. "Yeah. Who are you?" One of the men in suits approached James and handed him a thick stack of papers bound with a heavy clip. "You are being served," the man explained. "Civil lawsuit for breach of contract, intellectual property theft, and willful non-compliance. Plaintiff, Vanguard Defense Logistics." The room went completely silent. You could hear the espresso machine hissing in the background. "What's this?" James laughed nervously. "Is this a prank, David?" Mark pushed his way to the forefront. "Nathaniel, what the hell is this? We have a meeting scheduled. We had a deadline." Nathaniel cut him off. "It expired on Thursday. You did not respond to the formal notice of audit. According to Clause 14C of Section 9 of the MSA, Vanguard is immediately terminating the service agreement for cause and seeking damages for unauthorized use of unlicensed IP." Terminating. James's face became the color of Elmer's glue. "You are unable to terminate. That is a $65 million contract." Nathaniel corrected, saying the contract was for $65 million. Now it's a $100 million lawsuit, including trouble damages for the fraud discovered during our preliminary review. "Fraud?" David squeaked from the side of the stage. "We have reason to believe you suppressed known liabilities regarding the IP architect's royalties," Nathaniel said, scanning the room. "He found me. I didn't wave or smile. I just adjusted my glasses," Nathaniel said, returning his gaze to James. "Your license to use the software is revoked effective immediately. Unless, of course, you can prove you have paid the outstanding debts to the IP owner." James examined the papers in his hand. He flipped them open. "We own the IP. Read page 42. "James," Nathaniel said coldly. "Clause 14C. You do not own it until you have paid the royalty. Which you have not done." Mark took the papers from James. He scanned the page. I saw the moment it struck him. I saw his hands begin to shake. The paper rattled audibly. "The raise." Mark spoke quietly about the cost of living adjustment. He looked up. He looked to the back of the room. He looked at me. Every head in the room turned. 200 people followed Mark's gaze to where I stood near the exit. I did not shrink. I did not look down. I walked forwards. The crowd dispersed like the Red Sea. I walked straight up to the stage. James asked Emily, his voice trembling. "What is happening?" "I believe," I stated, calmly and clearly, "that my raise had just been found illegal." I removed an envelope from my blazer pocket. "Elena's letter of representation includes whistleblower protection." I handed it to Mark. "I believe this belongs to you," I explained. Then I turned to Nathaniel. "Shall we go to the conference room? We seem to have some negotiating to do." Nathaniel smiled as a shark smelt blood in the water. "After you and Miss Parker walked out of the break room together." Behind us, the silence collapsed into complete chaos. 10 minutes later, we were in the boardroom. On one side, Nathaniel and I. On the other side, James, CEO, David, CFO, and Mark, GC. In the middle, a large stack of lawsuit papers, and a deafening silence. James looked like he was about to vomit. "Emily, we can fix this. We can. We can unlock the raise. Retroactive. 5%. 10%. I laughed. It was genuine laughter. "James, we are well past 10%. We're talking about Clause 14C. Do you understand what that is?" You found a loophole in the contract, David yelled. He was perspiring. It is sabotage. It is a standard protection clause. Nathaniel interjected smoothly. One that your company signed, triggered by meeting the milestones, and then ignored when notified. We did not know. Mark pleaded. Emily. We did not tell you. I emailed you on Tuesday. I replied quietly. Subject. Vanguard whines again. You told me to handle it. You instructed me to prioritize the merger due diligence. You did not read it, Mark. You told me to handle it was alive. You told me to handle it, Mark. Mark opened his mouth and then closed it. He knew I had the email. He knew I had the logs. Nathaniel leans forward and says, here's the reality. Pinnacle Innovations owes Miss Parker approximately $400,000 in back royalties plus interest. Furthermore, you instructed your staff to remove the financial liability flag. Yes, we're aware of that. You are considering personal liability for the officers involved. David turned pale. Kevin, he whispered. Kevin is a nice kid, I said. Leave him out of it. So, what do you want? James inquired. He sounded defeated. Do you want the money? Fine. We will pay $400,000. Simply make the lawsuit go away. We cannot lose Vanguard. It kills the company. It's not just the money, I explained. It is the structure. You proved that you cannot be trusted with the IP. You attempted to defraud the system's creator. I moved a piece of paper across the table. It was a term sheet that I had created with Alina over the weekend. One option is to pay all back royalties immediately, totaling $430,000 plus interest. 2. The company received a formal apology for compensation-related administrative errors. 3. Reinstate the royalty clause with a penalty multiplier for future delays. 4. My legal fees were paid in full. James looked at the paper. Emily, this is a lot of money. Nathaniel explained that it is less expensive than losing a $65 million client. Vanguard will only agree to drop the breach of contract lawsuit if Miss Parker signs a waiver stating that she is satisfied. If she doesn't sign, we'll walk today. James looked at David. David looked at the floor. Mark rubbed his temples, as if he were trying to push his brain back into his skull. One more thing, I added. Everyone looked up. I want a promotion, I stated. The Director of Contract Compliance reports directly to the board, not the legal department. I no longer trust Mark to read my emails. Mark flinched, and I continued. I want complete autonomy to audit all executive expenses for compliance with vendor contracts. David's eyes widened. I knew what was in those expense reports. The client dinners were actually bachelor parties, and the trip was only to Napa. You can't do that, David hissed. Then Nathaniel files the lawsuit, I explained simply. And the discovery process will unearth all of those receipts anyway. David, it's your choice. An internal audit by me, or a federal audit conducted by the court. For more than a minute, the room was silent. The air conditioner hummed. James slumped in his chair. He looked at me. Really looked at me. First time in 5 years. He couldn't see the quiet woman in the cardigan anymore. He noticed the person who held his life in her hands. Fine, James whispered. Done. We'll sign. Excellent. Nathaniel explained, clicking his pen. I've got the installment agreement right here. I watched as they signed. James's hand was heavy. David appeared to be signing his own death warrant. Mark simply looked tired. When they finished, I took the document. Thank you, I replied. Now, excuse me. I have some work to do. Apparently, there was a compliance issue that became lost in the law. I need to go and fix it. The wire transfer arrived in my account on Wednesday, $430,000. I stared at the number in my banking app. It looked like a telephone number. It seemed like freedom, but the money was only the beginning. The real payment was fear. The following week, the changes began. James announced that he would step away from day-to-day operations, to focus on visionary strategy. Translation. When the board learned about Vanguard's near miss, they placed him in timeout. David, the CFO, chose to pursue other opportunities. He was escorted out of the building on Tuesday. I watched from my office window as he carried a box containing personal items to his Porsche. He did not look back. Rumor had it that my first audit of his expenses revealed some very interesting invoices for consulting fees paid to his brother-in-law. Mark remained, but as a ghost. He sat in his office, door closed, now reading contracts. Every time he saw me in the hallway, he nodded respectfully and scurried off. As for me, I got the corner office with a view of the bay. I replaced the Hustle Harder neon sign with a lovely, tasteful abstract painting. My current title is Director of Strategic Compliance and Intellectual Property Governance. I hired Kevin. He is currently my senior analyst. We follow a strict policy. We read everything. We flagged everything, and we never ignore a red cell on the spreadsheet. The office culture also changed. The ping-pong table was moved to the basement. The salespeople learned to knock before entering my office. They discovered that Emily must sign off on this, so you better have your paperwork in order or God help you. Vanguard stayed. Nathaniel and I eat lunch once a month. We don't discuss business much. We talk about wine, travel, and the stupidity of people who believe they can decipher the fine print. Around 6 months later, I received an email from Jake in HR. Subject: Annual Review and Compensation Adjustment. Hello Emily, I just wanted to let you know that your new compensation package has been fully processed and approved by the board. There are no issues this time. Best wishes, Jake. I smiled. I took a sip of my expensive tea, imported from Japan, and now expensed to the company. I replied. Thank you, Jake. Make sure to file it correctly this time. We don't want it to get lost in legal again. I shut my laptop. The sun was setting over Silicon Valley, casting long shadows across its glass buildings. They say that the devil is in the details. They are wrong. The devil is in the details, reader. And she just received a My stepdaughter called my twins spawn and wished they had never been born, so I stopped paying her $28,000 tuition fees. My stepdaughter referred to my twins as offspring, and expressed her wish that they had never been born. I therefore stopped paying her tuition entirely. When Daniel's daughter Emily was 12, I married him, and for 4 years we were practically a family. Her mother lived across the nation with her new husband, and I never attempted to replace her. Emily spent her summers with her mother, and her school days with us. I used to assist with schoolwork as part of our wonderful routine. On Sundays, she would tell me about her crushes as I braided her hair, and we would bake together. She referred to me by my first name, which was acceptable, but she always made me cry when she told her friends that I was her bonus mom. Emily was 16 when I became pregnant with the twins, and she appeared thrilled. She attended ultrasounds, assisted with painting the nursery, and even organized a surprise baby shower for me with her friends. She learned how to change diapers, declared herself the greatest big sister ever, and would run home from school to hold the boys after they were born. Seeing everyone together made Daniel immensely happy. After turning 18, Emily was accepted to her ideal university, which was 3 hours away. We were ecstatic. Daniel and I decided that her family would take care of the books and spending money, and we would pay for the tuition and accommodation. Pricey. But Emily's future will make it worthwhile. During that first semester, she returned home every few weeks, and everything appeared to be as usual. When the twins saw her, they would scream with delight as they passed by. Something changed in the second semester. Emily began critiquing my every action. The twins wore gaudy attire. Their playthings made too much noise. I didn't make enough organic food. Despite the fact that we had merely installed a toy box and kept all of her belongings, she complained that we had transformed her room into a playroom. She was just getting used to college life. According to Daniel, she took Amber, her roommate, home for spring break. Amber was among the females who believed that parents were nothing more than ATMs, and that having younger siblings was a source of embarrassment. She kept saying that Emily was unable to travel to Cancun like everyone else because she was stuck visiting relatives. Emily began to concur, stating that it was hard to unwind at home with the twins. I asked Emily to watch the boys for an hour one afternoon while I went grocery shopping. When I returned, Emily and Amber were watching Netflix on the couch as they were sobbing in their cribs. She put them in timeout after claiming they wouldn't stop making noise. They were 3 years old. She simply rolled her eyes, and stated that we were being theatrical about newborns who wouldn't even remember when Daniel spoke to her about duty that evening. Emily declared that she would remain in school for an internship when summer arrived. An internship did not exist. Daniel didn't want to make trouble, so we continued to pay tuition even though her friends shared pictures of them at the beach every day. The twins went to embrace her when she returned home for Daniel's birthday. But she actually pushed them away, claiming they were sticky. Daniel then said at supper that since the boys were growing, we were thinking about moving to a larger home. Emily went crazy, claimed that no one cared about her anymore, that we were deleting the house where she grew up, and that everything was now focused on the twins. I attempted to explain that if we bought a house, we would make sure she had a room. She remarked, "I wish the twins had never been born because they ruined everything and made my dad into someone who only cared about his new family," looking me in the eye. Daniel's cheeks turned pale. There they were, the twins. The older one questioned why he was upset. As Daniel attempted to speak with Emily, I led the boys upstairs. The twins were evidence that I had replaced her, and I could hear her yelling about it. How she had a better life before I arrived with my spawn. My babies are the subject of that word. An hour later, Daniel appeared defeated. Stated that everyone might need some space, because Emily was returning to school early. Though I sensed something needed to change, I still consented. I went over our accounts that evening. The annual cost of Emily's education was $28,000. Monies that could be used to pay for the twins' college education. With 2 babies, we were having financial difficulties. I decided we needed to update our payment details for the upcoming semester. The college financial aid office informed us over the phone, removed our card and replaced it with Sarah's contact information, Emily's mother. I then called her mother, Sarah, and informed her that due to the twins' expenses, we were no longer able to pay for tuition. Sarah panicked out and said she couldn't do it on her own. I advised Emily to either transfer to a less expensive location or take out loans like most students. Emily yelled at Daniel over the phone 2 weeks later, claiming that her registration had been blocked due to non-payment. For 5 days, Daniel roamed the house like a ghost. He would go to his home office till midnight, have dinner with the twins while ogling his plate, and then get coffee in the morning without glancing at me. I didn't know how to respond to the boys' repeated questions about why Daddy was quiet. I made 2 attempts to speak with him, but he simply nodded and turned to leave. Before the boys woke up on the 4th morning, I discovered him in the kitchen. Instead of acting as like I didn't exist, I asked if we could truly talk about this. His coffee mug smashed against the counter when he slammed it down. He claimed that before making such a significant decision regarding his daughter, I ought to have spoken with him. Morgan takes of. My face started to get red, so I informed him that when his daughter called the boys spawn, he ought to have spoken up for me and the boys. I was shifting the topic, he argued. And that wasn't the point. I pointed out that he was upset with me for taking action after he allowed her to abuse our kids without any repercussions. Without saying goodbye to the twins, he picked up his keys and headed off to work. When Aiden asked me at breakfast why his father hadn't given him a hug, I had to pretend that he was simply preoccupied. Sarah's number rung on my phone the following afternoon. Daniel's phone began ringing after I sent it to voicemail. I heard the entire exchange on the baby monitor while he was upstairs changing Liam's diaper. I could hear every word Sarah was yelling. She claimed that because he had neglected his financial responsibilities to his daughter, she was suing him. She claimed that in order to put his new family first, he was now breaching the vows they had made. Daniel sounded worn out as he attempted to clarify that they had never signed any enforceable contracts. Sarah shouted that it didn't matter because she had witnesses and he had verbally committed. She claimed that he was favoring his offspring over his first daughter, and that she would ensure that everyone was aware of his true fatherhood. Sarah hung up on Daniel when he stated that he wanted more time to think things out. Part of me was happy that Sarah was displaying her crazy side, but I also felt awful that I had placed Daniel in this position, so I stood in the kitchen feeling strange. Even though we both knew I had heard the call, we didn't discuss it when he walked downstairs 10 minutes later. 2 days later, my mother called. We often only speak on Sundays, so I was taken aback. She claimed that Daniel's mother had brought up the matter, and that she was interested in hearing my perspective. I gave an explanation of everything, from the spawn comment to the tuition cutoff. I thought she would be supportive, but she became silent. She went on to say that while I had every right to feel hurt, it was unfair to abruptly stop paying tuition. She claimed that I was portraying Emily as malevolent when, in reality, she was just a bewildered adolescent observing her family's transformation. Mom interrupted me as I was trying to explain the money and how we couldn't afford it. I realized what she meant when she claimed that wasn't the true problem. She claimed that rather than considering my options, I had taken a significant decision out of rage. I informed her that she had no idea what it was like to hear someone refer to your baby as offspring because I felt my throat tighten. Even if she claimed to understand, my response was nonetheless inappropriate. Feeling like I was being attacked from all sides, I hung up. My own mother believed that I was the villain. Sitting on the couch, I pondered whether or not I was perceived by everyone as the bad stepmother who destroyed everything. I took out our bank statements that evening after the boys had gone to bed. Daniel took care of the most of the bills, so I hadn't seen our real finances in months. There used to be $18 in our savings account, but now there is $2,500. In the previous 2 months, we had used credit cards 4 times to purchase food. Beginning in January, the twins' daycare expenses increased to $1,500 per month. We had been paying about $2,500 a month to Emily's school, until I totaled up the tuition. It makes sense why we were broke. When I saw the numbers presented that way, I felt justified. We were practically unable to raise 2 children and continue to make payments. However, I wondered what would happen if Daniel felt that I had ruined his connection with Emily, to the point where he was unable to forgive me. Would he go? Would he always be angry with me? I went to bed after shutting down the laptop, but I was unable to fall asleep. Daniel had already fallen asleep with his back to me. The following morning, Daniel received a text from his sister that included screenshots. He showed me his phone as I was giving the twins breakfast. Emily had shared on Facebook that her father had left her behind, and preferred his new, ideal family over hers. There were 50 comments on the post, all of which expressed sympathy. I was being referred to as a cunning stepmother, and Daniel as a deadbeat father. I had never met them before, but some distant cousins told me they always knew Daniel would do this. Stepmothers always take fathers away from their real children, said one of Emily's pals. Reading them made me ill. Daniel snatched his phone back before I could respond honestly to what she had said. Posting anything, he claimed, would make things worse. I questioned how it could be worse than everyone believing I was a bad person. As the twins saw us quarrel, Aiden broke down in tears, and he remarked, "Trust him. It could get a lot worse." Daniel looked discouraged as he stared at his phone as I grabbed him up and led the 2 youngsters to the playroom. Daniel was quieter than normal during dinner that night. He said he needed to speak with me after we had put the twins to bed. As we sat in the living room, he confessed that he had been discussing ways to assist Emily with Sarah, without telling me. I had the impression that he had struck me in the stomach. He said that he had been doing that ever since the registration was blocked when I asked how long he had been doing it. He was undermining me and making me appear to be the only villain, so I got up and said so. He claimed that because he was her father, he couldn't simply leave her. I screamed that he had betrayed me by seeing his ex-wife behind my back. He claimed that since I had made a decision on my own, he was also doing so. He was aware that what I stated was completely different. He rose and picked up a pillow from the sofa. He told me he was sleeping in the guest room when I asked what he was doing. I asked him if he was serious as I followed him down the hallway. Without responding, he shut the door to the guest room. After 5 minutes of standing there, I returned to our bedroom. Thinking about how I might have ruined my marriage over one terrible supper kept me up until 4 in the morning. 5 nights later, at 2 in the morning, Aiden woke up screaming. When I rushed to his room, I saw him sobbing over how angry he was. He kept asking when Mom was coming home because he missed her, even though I hugged him and told him I wasn't angry. Restoring his sleep took an hour. When I took a shower the following morning, Liam wouldn't let me leave the bathroom. Before I left, he was sobbing outside the glass door. Instead of using his high chair for breakfast, he perched on my lap and refused to eat until I fed him. This continued for a week. I reported the differences when I took them to their pediatrician for their routine examination. If there was stress at home, the doctor inquired. I acknowledged that Daniel and his daughter were at odds. Children pick up on household stress and it affects their behavior, she remarked gently. She recommended family counseling. I felt worse when I left than when I arrived. To shield the twins from Emily's brutality, I had severed our relationship. But now my choice was harming them in a different way. After a week, Daniel received a big packet from a law firm in Sarah's state. As I prepared the twins' lunch, he unwrapped it at the kitchen table. As he read, his face turned white. And he read, "Ease intensive tame." Without a word, he gave the letter to me. It came from Sarah's attorney, who insisted that we start paying tuition again right away. The letter threatens to sue Emily for emotional harm and breach of verbal contract. It said that due to our abrupt abandonment, Emily was depressed and her grades were slipping. She had been prescribed antidepressants, according to the medical reports that were attached. Daniel had a defeated expression. I took a seat and read it twice in its entirety. Daniel said that verbal agreements may be enforceable in some jurisdictions, and that Sarah most likely had emails or texts in which we had discussed tuition payment. I asked, "We never signed anything. So how could they sue us?" I inquired about the expense of hiring a lawyer to challenge this. Probably $10,000 just to start, he added. I came to the conclusion that we would lose money either way. Not only were we unable to pay for tuition, but we were also unable to pay for attorneys. Daniel just sat there looking at the letter, while I buried my head in my hands. That weekend, I got a call from Trish at work. She claimed to have done some research, and that her daughter attended the same college as Emily. When I questioned Trish about it, she revealed that she had ordered her daughter to look through Emily's social media accounts. She forwarded me 3 months' worth of Instagram story screenshots. Emily was seen at a concert, at someone's lake house, at a party with red cups all over the place, and at the beach with friends. These weren't the actions of a distraught girl who was experiencing abandonment. When I saw evidence that Emily had lied to both the lawyer and her mother, I felt justified. However, I was also depressed. Sarah and everyone else were being duped by this girl who used to bake with me on Sundays. I saved the screenshots and thanked Trish. I texted Daniel to let him know that I had information about Emily when he and the twins were in the grocery store. 5 hours passed before he responded. On Monday morning, Ken gave me a call on my cell phone. I had always gotten along well with Daniel's father, but when Daniel wasn't there, we didn't talk much. Without Daniel knowing, he asked if we might have coffee together. Despite my suspicions, I consented. We got together at a diner close to his residence. Ken got right to the point and placed his coffee order. He claimed that he had to share with me the details of Daniel's first marriage. Ken shook his head when I replied I understood the fundamentals. He clarified that Emily had always been a weapon for Sarah. Sarah had threatened to deny Daniel custody whenever he didn't comply with her demands. She would abruptly decide Emily needed to spend the holidays with her, or she would cancel his weekends with Emily. In a panic, Daniel would give in to Sarah's demands in order to see his daughter. According to Ken, this continued for years until Emily turned 12 and was able to make her own decisions. He gave me a serious look and told me that while I was right to set limits, I had to realize that Daniel was afraid of losing his daughter entirely because Sarah had done it once before. My chest tightened. "Do you think I should just let Sarah win?" I said. Ken declined, but perhaps there was a compromise that didn't require hiring attorneys or severing ties with Emily entirely. As I drove home, I considered all Ken had said and pondered whether there was any way to clean up the mess I had made. In the dining booth, Ken leaned back and used both hands to wipe his face. He appeared older than normal, and his fatigue went beyond simple sleep deprivation. He claimed that roughly 10 years prior, his brother Ashton had experienced a similar situation with his stepchildren. Every time they came to visit, the children from his wife's first marriage made life terrible and never welcomed him. They would steal money from his wallet, smash things in his house, and accuse him, and tell their mother he was cruel to them even though he had only spoken 2 words. Ashton loved his wife, and did everything he could to make it work. He transported them to practices, paid for their school vacations and sports teams, and attended games where they pretended he didn't exist. They never did, despite his wife's constant assurances that they would. He couldn't give them instructions because by the time they were teenagers, they were openly hostile, calling him names and claiming he wasn't their father. The oldest daughter's accusation that Ashton had smacked her during a fight about her curfew was the tipping point. Although it was untrue, Child Protective Services became involved and looked into him for 3 months. Even after the lawsuit was closed, his bond with those children was permanently ruined, and his marriage barely made it through. According to Ken, Ashton continues to pay their college tuition because his wife pleaded with him to, but they no longer communicate with him and don't attend family gatherings. He gave me a serious look and explained that biological parents with blended families are constantly caught between their old and new families. Their child losing the whole family, the divorce, and selecting a new spouse all cause them to feel guilty. Despite their best efforts, the step-parent constantly feels like an outsider because of the entire history they were not a part of. Because they are upset over things that aren't truly anyone's fault, children can sense this tension and occasionally use it as a weapon. He claimed that I had every right to be hurt, because what transpired at Daniel's birthday dinner was nasty. However, Emily had been coping with her parents' divorce since she was 7 years old. So it's likely that seeing her dad start a new family triggered emotions she wasn't prepared to deal with. As I stirred my coffee, I noticed a change in my chest. This was more than one bad remark or one supper. Before I even met Daniel, there had been years of complex family issues. After the divorce, Emily had taken center stage in his life. After I arrived, there were 2 infants who need round-the-clock care. I hadn't given much attention to what it may have been like for her to see her role in her father's life dwindle since I had been so preoccupied with keeping my boys safe. Before I departed, Ken gave me a hug and paid for our coffees. He claimed that although Daniel loved Emily, he also loved me and the twins. We all had to figure out how to live together as a family, without ruining one another. Daniel was feeding the twins lunch in their high chairs when I arrived home. He asked me where I had been after glancing at me. He halted with a scoop of mashed carrots halfway to Aiden's mouth when I informed him I'd met with his father. I told him to just talk about Emily and the whole thing, when he asked what his dad wanted. Daniel set down the spoon, and used a towel to wipe his hands. I shouldn't have gone behind his back, he added, and his dad had no business getting involved. I was furious because I had gone to grab coffee with his father, rather than plotting a plot. For the remainder of the day, we did not speak. For the first time in a week, I checked Facebook after the twins had gone to sleep that evening. My notifications were piling up. Emily wrote a lengthy essay about how her dad's new ideal family felt like a replacement for her own, having grown up with divorced parents. In fact, she had used the twins' names and labeled Daniel. After 6 hours, the post had received more than 300 comments. With each one, I felt worse as I scrolled through them. Daniel is being referred to by many as a deadbeat father, who abandoned his first daughter in favor of his new children. Someone claimed that I was obviously a cunning stepmother who desired Emily's exclusion. The tragic fact that Daniel had forgotten his origins was mentioned by one of Emily's aunts from Sarah's side. I had met some extended family members maybe twice, and they were sharing their thoughts on our private family business. Even strangers, friends of friends, added their opinions about what awful parents we were. As I read Emily's account of feeling forgotten and erased, returning home to discover her childhood room transformed into a playroom for the replacement kids, and her father picking his new bride over his own daughter, my hands began to shake. She gave the impression that we had cast her out into the open. She gave the impression that Daniel had just accepted her suggestion to have the twins. She gave the impression that I had deliberately excluded her from her own family. There was a part of me that wanted to write a comment outlining her genuine remarks regarding my babies. A part of me wanted to share screenshots of her pretending to be depressed while having a good time at the beach. There was a part of me that wished I would never be seen again. I was staring at my phone when Daniel entered the bedroom. I rotated the television to face him as he questioned what was wrong. As he began to read, his face turned white. He scanned through the comments while perched on the side of the bed. He remained silent for a considerable amount of time. I shook my head when he finally inquired if I had replied or remarked. "Good," he said. I questioned how it could get worse than hundreds of people believing we are monsters. "Don't engage, it'll only make it worse." He had no response. Daniel recommended marriage counseling the following morning. "We obviously couldn't work this out on our own," he continued, "and perhaps a professional might improve our communication." I had no other option, so I consented. That Thursday, we were scheduled to see Dr. Smith, a therapist who specialized in blended families. I walked in hoping she would see my point of view, acknowledge how offended I was by Emily's remarks, and concur that stopping tuition was a fair punishment. Rather, she asked me defensive-sounding questions for the entire hour. She was curious as to why I hadn't consulted Daniel before making such a significant financial choice. She wondered if I had thought about Emily's reaction, if her registration was suddenly blocked. She pointed out that by calling Sarah directly, I had completely circumvented Daniel. I attempted to clarify that I was shielding my kids from someone who had referred to them as spawn. Dr. Smith acknowledged that it was hurtful, and nodded. But she also questioned if I had discussed with Emily why Emily had said it or if I had just retaliated right away. She arched an eyebrow when I pointed out that the word retaliated was strong. She claimed that I had withheld $28,000 in financial assistance as retribution for remarks made during a disagreement. My face began to heat up. I explained to her that she had no idea what it felt like to hear someone wish your children had never been born. Dr. Smith assured me that it was really painful. But then she said something that made me want to leave. She claimed that by penalizing Emily, rather than talking to my husband about how we might resolve the matter together, it appeared as though I was parenting Daniel. She claimed that I had deprived Daniel, Emily's father, of his right to make choices regarding his own daughter. Daniel sat motionless on the couch next to me. When Dr. Smith was asked how he felt about my choice, he replied he understood my hurt but wished I had spoken to him first. Daniel said that we hadn't talked about money before I made the move. Daniel replied that we hadn't decided on punishments for Emily jointly, when she inquired. I felt deceived and ganged up. "I don't think this is helping," I remarked, getting to my feet. I picked up my bag and left even though Dr. Smith begged me to have a seat again. I got inside the car even though Daniel followed me to the parking lot and asked me to get back in. Silently, we drove home. A second session was not scheduled. Our bank statements were laid out in front of me as I sat at the kitchen table that weekend while Daniel took the twins to the park. I went line by line through 6 months' worth of charges. I insisted on purchasing organic baby food, which was about twice as expensive as conventional. In just 3 months, the expensive baby outfits I purchased from that downtown boutique totaled more than $800. I had read that the particular educational toys were excellent for development, so I had ordered them online. I felt terrible when I summed up the identical Halloween costumes I had purchased in August because I thought they may sell out. In only the last 6 months, I had spent more than $2,500 on unnecessary items for the twins. Every time Emily's tuition was deducted from our account, I was secretly resenting it. I recalled all the times I'd been irritated that we were helping her when I'd noticed a fee for her apartment or food plan. When Daniel said that she needed to send her more money for textbooks, I recalled feeling resentful. I convinced myself that it was because she didn't value what we were doing and was ungrateful. However, as I sat there examining the evidence of my own expenditures, I had to acknowledge something unpleasant. I was jealous of the money Daniel had spent on Emily over the years, which contributed to my animosity at her. Instead of going to me and the twins, the money went to her. Money reminded me that we were Daniel's second family, and she had been his first. I was ashamed of myself for even having such thoughts. When I married Daniel, Emily was still a child. Her parents' divorce was not anything she chose. She didn't request that her father be married again and have more kids. Eventually, though, I had shifted my perspective from Daniel's daughter in need of assistance to one of competition. I laid my head on the table and closed all the bank statements. I would stop at nothing to keep the twins safe since they were my babies. However, it's possible that my actions weren't actually intended to safeguard them. On Tuesday afternoon, Daniel was working from home when his phone rang. His voice became low and solemn as soon as I heard him respond. His expression was odd when he entered the living room where I was building blocks with the twins. "That was Emily's college financial aid advisor," he said. "Emily was on academic probation, and if she didn't improve by the following semester, she might lose her merit scholarship completely. She was barely passing her current classes, after failing 2 last term. The counselor had contacted to let her parents know what was going on since they were worried about her." Daniel merely gazed at the wall, while seated on the couch. He stated he had no idea when I asked what he wanted to do. Daniel accepted the block that Aiden brought him, but he did nothing with it. I experienced a complex range of feelings that I was unable to identify. I honestly worried about Emily's future, since I knew that she would suffer for years if she didn't graduate from college. I was a little upset that she was squandering her chances by pretending to be a victim on Facebook. I felt bad because I wondered if her grades had suffered because of the tuition. Based on those Instagram pictures, I had a sneaking suspicion that she had been partying excessively and that this was her own fault. Despite everything that had transpired, I came to the realization that I still cared about her. That perplexed me since I wanted to dismiss her as ruthless and self-centered, yet I was unable to do so. For years, she had been a member of our family. She had cradled the twins while they were babies and assisted in painting the nursery. On Sunday afternoons, she had joined me in baking cookies and referred to me as her bonus mom. Somewhere beneath all the hurt and rage, that girl was still there. Daniel informed me on Thursday night that he would be visiting Emily at college this weekend to discuss the situation. He answered no when I asked whether I was invited. They have to be the only ones involved. I had the impression that he had struck me in the stomach. After everything she had said and done, I questioned whether he was siding with her. "This isn't about sides," he said. "It was about attempting to make things right as her father before she totally ruined her future." I told him that because I was his wife, we ought to decide jointly. He gave me a look and remarked that I had decided on her tuition on my own. Thus, he was choosing to visit her on his own. I tried not to cry when I started crying. I accused him of betraying me during our heated disagreement, and he accused me of attempting to distance himself from his daughter. He said that I had forced him to make a difficult decision between his wife and his child. I accused him of being overly dramatic, and he accused me of being domineering. Both of us uttered things that were probably inappropriate. Once more, he slept in the guest room. Without saying goodbye, he packed his bags and headed out to Emily's college on Friday morning. As I watched him drive off in the kitchen, I questioned whether this would truly be the end of our marriage. While the twins stayed with my mother, Daniel and I worked through everything over the weekend. We actually discussed what we could manage without going bankrupt, as we were seated at the kitchen table with our bank accounts spread out and the community college tuition figures scrawled on a notepad. Daniel said that he had been throwing money at the issue rather than dealing with Emily's conduct, because he was afraid she would become like his cousin, who never completed school and spent 20 years working in retail. I told him that I had been so preoccupied with keeping the twins safe that I had forgotten Emily was still a little child, who had witnessed her family fall apart, and was unsure of how to deal with it. Instead of paying $28,000 with explicit requirements, we decided to pay about $7,000 for a semester at the community college close to Sarah's home. Emily was required to maintain a B average, go to in-person or video family therapy sessions twice a month, and stop disparaging us on social media. We would assist her in transferring to a state school for her junior year if she maintained her grades and made an effort. Even if it wasn't the ideal education she had envisioned, it was something, and it seemed more legitimate than simply giving her money while she called my children shit online. While I stayed at home with the boys, Daniel drove to Sarah's house to personally notify Emily. 3 hours later, he returned, looking relieved yet fatigued. Emily sobbed and acknowledged that she had been struggling because she was angry and depressed, but didn't know how to seek for help. She stated she would attempt treatment if it meant not losing her dad entirely. And she accepted the community college idea. I wanted to think she was sincere, but I had also witnessed her manipulate circumstances in the past, so I felt this strange mixture of hope and caution. 2 weeks later, we received word that Emily was living with Sarah at the community college for the spring semester, and that her first therapy session had been set. Daniel appeared lighter, as if he had finally set down the concrete blocks he had been carrying. Thanksgiving arrived sooner than I had anticipated, and Emily and Sarah were on their way up for supper. While the twins ran about wondering when she was coming, I spent the morning cooking, and trying not to throw up from nerves. Daniel kept shifting items on the table that didn't need to be moved, and checking his phone. Emily's hair was pulled back in an untidy ponytail instead of her normal flawless curls, and she appeared thinner and more exhausted when they arrived. Instead of pushing the twins away, she actually went down on the floor, and let them to climb on her as they shouted and ran to her. Sarah made awkward small chat for an hour before departing. Then it was just the two of us. At first, dinner was somber, with everyone speaking carefully. However, when Liam knocked over his milk, we all laughed, which helped to diffuse the atmosphere. Emily asked if we could have a quiet conversation after the twins went to bed. Even though I felt sick to my stomach, I went with her to the back porch, where we used to sit and braid our hair. She apologized for referring to the twins as spawn, saying she was so upset over feeling replaced, that she had said the most heinous thing she could think of while glancing at her hands. She claimed that although her feelings concerning the divorce and the new family were real, the way she had expressed them was incorrect, and that her therapist was assisting her in seeing this. I apologized to her for abruptly stopping her tuition, and I said that rather than making such a big decision out of rage, I should have spoken to Daniel first, and dealt with my injured feelings more effectively. It wasn't flawless or fully healed, but it was something genuine, and we both shed a few tears. Before going to bed, she went inside and played blocks with the twins, and Aiden dozed off while clutching her hand. After 5 months, Emily phoned the twins every Sunday, to video chat with them. She would point at the TV while holding up drawings she had done in art class, goofy images of trucks and dinosaurs that made the boys giggle. At the conclusion of the semester, she had 3 Bs, and an A-. And when Daniel saw them, he started crying. When we shared family pictures, she occasionally commented that she felt excluded. There were still times when it was clear she was having difficulty with things, but she was making an effort rather than merely being upset. I had to come to terms with the fact that our relationship would never be like it was when she was 12 and we spent Sundays baking cookies. That was the simple fact that she was no longer my bonus daughter. And whether anyone wanted to acknowledge it or not, the twins had altered the course of history. However, she was making progress, and that was important. Daniel and I went to therapy together to go through how we had both handled things poorly, with me making important decisions by myself when I felt upset and him avoiding conflict. We had difficult talks about priorities and communication, and how our lack of communication had nearly cost us our marriage. Every time she made a video call, the twins lit up and asked about her nonstop. They also followed her around the house like puppies when she returned home for spring vacation. We were learning how to truly be a blended family, rather than acting as though everything was great, while animosity festered beneath the surface. Things weren't perfect and probably never would be. I had discovered that sometimes the best way to safeguard my children was to have awkward conversations rather than make grandiose gestures. Additionally, even if Emily's expression of her complex thoughts about her family altering was entirely incorrect, she was permitted to have them.